I mean, I love hearing that because what I have noticed, I think, is like more media representation of whether it's going to therapy or certain mental health struggles. And I do feel like there's been, with that awareness and with more of that representation on film, TV, it's really kind of normalized. Going through all sorts of stuff, and that it's okay to seek help, and it's important to, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually really a sign of strength to do so.
Welcome to Guys That Listen. I'm Peter, and today we got a special guest, Trina, on the pod.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. I'm Trina Chan. I am a licensed psychotherapist. I've got an office in Beverly Hills, and I've been practicing for just over 9 years now. I grew up in Hong Kong and moved out here just over 10 years ago. So, love LA. My background is in the arts, education, and psychology. And I guess I'm really passionate about finding or using creative ways to combine the arts and psychology and raise awareness and kind of reduce the stigma surrounding mental health issues. So.
That's awesome. Can you explain what is the difference between a psychotherapist versus someone who just deems themselves a therapist?
Well, I guess I would say that would be psychotherapist, I would say, related to like psychology, and so a therapist, I guess you could have like massage therapists or sort of different occupational therapists and so on. So I guess psychotherapist would be a slightly more specific term in that sense. But
how did you get into that?
Good question. I guess I've always been fascinated with human behavior. So I've always had a strong desire to just better understand like why we are the way we are. And I guess I've always been interested in making an impact in meaningful ways. Excuse me. So I would say even from a really young age, I was really interested in like the arts and community service. And I remember when I was 16 years old, I reached out to Make-A-Wish Foundation and ended up creating a short inspirational film for like young cancer patients to instill hope, and also like enlisted the help of some Hong Kong celebrities at the time to share some words of encouragement. And so that was something that I was interested in at a young age. And then I was also very much involved in like plays and musicals, and I realized what I loved so much about the process was really like discovering different characters, like delving into the complex psyches and like understanding their motivations for behaving in different ways and bringing them to life. So I think I've always had that interest.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, then I moved out here about over 10 years ago and did method acting for a year, and that was fascinating in terms of like the relaxation work and what would come out. I mean, I'd see from like relaxing certain muscles in the body, people would have all sorts of strong emotional responses. And that's when I became really fascinated with the mind-body connection and tried, hypnotherapy on my own as well, just to see what that would be like. And I guess that was what fueled my desire to get into clinical psych, and I've been in the field ever since.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's actually really cool because you have the experiences of your youth just being in the arts, and then you grew up to go into academics, into psychotherapy, and that influenced your psychotherapy. So it's not strictly just things from academics. Your approach is a little different then, sounds like, because you said you include creative arts into it. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's a variety of ways. Actually, in 2022, I produced a theater production of Lucy Preble's play The Effect. And so that was, I believe it was at the National Theatre in the UK in 2012. And so we did the LA premiere of it in a couple years ago. And it has a lot of like mental health related themes. So it explores like love, depression, neuroscience, and heartbreak, and how to allow ourselves to be vulnerable again after heartbreak. So we did that and held it over Mental Health Awareness Month, and involved some nonprofit mental health organizations to get involved, and had some like Q&A discussions about different topics that the play explored. So like trauma or relationships and depression and so on. And it was really interesting because it was during a time when it was like community spaces started to reopen right after the pandemic. So I think having a space for people to like engage in meaningful discussions together and have that shared experience and like laugh and cry and I guess experience a range of emotions was really powerful.
Yeah, I can see how that kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, a great story is a great way to get people to open up their emotions, you know? Like a good sad story is going to get people to cry.
Yes.
You know, a very happy romantic story is going to make people feel a little bit bubbly and warm inside. So I can see why that works. And I noticed you mentioned this was after the pandemic. You've been doing this for 9 years, so obviously you've gone through this prior to the pandemic. Did you see a shift in mental health after the pandemic?
It was interesting because during the pandemic, I remember initially there were some people who were so resistant to even doing online therapy. But I think also people probably thought, oh, it's just going to take a month or two and then we'll be back to normal. And that wasn't the case. And so, I mean, I saw a shift in terms of people becoming personally more open to, alternative modes of I guess communication, or doing virtual sessions essentially. But in terms of a shift in sort of mental health, I definitely think there was a collective sense of like powerlessness, and certainly like an increase in isolation or depression for a lot of people. I think also this idea of like privacy or lack of privacy was very interesting. Like I had some clients, doing sessions in the bathroom or something where, or in the closet, or finding ways where they could have a sense of privacy.
Because everyone's home, right?
Exactly. And so I think that was difficult for a lot of people. But also I noticed that in relationships, either it was terrible, right? And it could have sort of, people ended up getting a divorce or breaking up, or it like accelerated that process, and people ended up having babies and getting married and so on. So definitely a very interesting time. Have you noticed kind of...
I noticed exactly that. I've talked about all those things that you mentioned on the podcast before, because that's what I was seeing around me. And just like you, I was always been interested in like psychology. So I like to notice patterns. And that was what really stood out to me, as well as like, all the depression and the anxiety, and also people's perceptions about things. I mentioned this on the podcast a couple of times. It was just a theory that I had, because I noticed a lot of my extremely outgoing friends become more introverted, so to say.
Yeah.
And they would say things like, oh, I always thought I was extroverted, but now that I'm always home, I noticed I'm actually introverted. And I'm like, I wonder if that's actually true. And I think, I don't know the science behind this stuff at all. It's just my own opinion. Yeah. But I do believe that like introversion and extroversion is on a scale. And if you don't use one or the other as much, you become more limited to it, right?
Sure.
Like a person who's used to be extroverted and going out a lot, if they slowly go out less, they're going to be less extroverted.
Right.
But to them, they might deem it as more introverted, which I think is still two different things.
Yeah, I fully agree in terms of it being on a sort of spectrum. And it's so interesting to see. Yeah, I mean, also, I think that's a great point in terms of how extroverted extroverts dealt with being confined versus introverts. And I noticed a lot of my more introverted friends really like kind of were okay with being in lockdown and having their own space, and there wasn't like a need to commit to any engagements. And some more extroverted friends struggled. But it's interesting that you were saying there was a bit of a shift for some people. And I wonder if some other factors played into that as well in terms
I'm sure.
of,
I'm sure. I saw a video of this psychiatrist. He spoke about it, this same issue, which was interesting because I was like, oh, I noticed that. I'm glad that he noticed it too. And he said it's not so much that they're introverted now. They're just extroverted with social anxiety because they haven't gone out enough to. Now when a conversation's to be had, since they haven't socialized in a long time, to process all that and to learn how to, socialize again takes up a lot of energy. So therefore you feel drained. And, I guess I don't know if you call it a symptom, but like something that will outline if you're an introvert is if you feel drained from social interactions. So that's why, like, self-diagnosing, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think during that time, everything just was put under a magnifying glass. You really had to really see yourself for what it is now,
Yes.
right? You had to live with yourself and your family and your loved ones too, 24/7.
Very
so
true.
now you see these things, and it's funny that you mentioned that these people who are going to online therapy sessions, that they would think they only need to take 1 or 2 months, because 1 or 2 months worth of therapy is not going to solve a lifetime's worth of problems. Right. But for whatever reason during this time, they feel like they need it more than ever. Because did you get a lot of new clients, would you say?
A few, yeah. It sort of came in sort of, it wasn't like a consistent stream. And, there were some months where there were quite a lot of people reaching out and other months that were quieter. But I would say I did get quite a few new clients. And it is interesting in terms of having to sit with ourselves and, sometimes that can be the hardest thing to do depending on, how we typically go about our day-to-day life. And some people kind of thrive on keeping really busy and then so that change of sitting with ourselves can bring up a lot of emotions. But I think it also helped in terms of, maybe shifting realizing certain priorities for people. And I noticed a lot of people moved back to be with family or made some big decisions as well.
Yeah, it was, for me, I honestly wish I could say I was super productive during those couple of years.
Yeah.
I felt like I was extremely stuck because I was going the complete opposite direction in my life where it was going. And I just didn't know how to get out of it. To be completely honest, I felt like I lost like 2 years of my life. But I know a lot of people who made the most of it, which is great. And I can see why, one of the reasons why I mentioned if there was a rise in mental health issues during this time was because I went through something. And I don't know, again, self-diagnosed, so I can't really say if it's, clinical depression or whatnot. But I have never felt like that in my life, to where I felt hopeless, where I couldn't get out of bed sometimes. I'm a kind of person who loves to keep busy, And for me to lay in my bed and look at the ceiling and not know what to do next, not even look at my phone, like in the darkness, felt exactly like that, just so helpless. It was weird.
And the sense of like not knowing how long this would go on for as well. Like I wonder if that, I'm sure that added to that. I definitely, it was such an interesting time for me as well. I think for the first part of it, I actually I was involved in this sort of startup in Hong Kong, and long story short, it was very disappointing, but I worked very hard. And so it was, no breaks, working till past midnight every day. And so in many ways, I didn't even, I probably would have done the same thing, with the lockdown or without. But then, once that got resolved, then it was all the different emotions and kind of sitting with the time and what had just happened, and also obviously everything that's going on in the world. And so, yeah, that was a lot for sure.
Yeah, it's weird how that affected everyone in one way or another. Some people good, some people bad.
Yeah.
But I do notice that the rise of mental health issues also comes with the rise of like mental health helpers. Like now, one of the biggest ads I see on any podcast is this company called BetterHelp. But I don't think prior to the pandemic that would have been, I don't know how successful they are. I would assume they're decently successful due to them just being on every podcast.
Yeah.
But prior, I think they probably would have a tough time. It was just like a window of opportunity for them, which kind of made sense.
For sure. I did notice like a huge kind of growth in terms of online therapy, like companies starting different ones. And in many ways, it's great in terms of accessible care. But yeah, I'm sure BetterHelp is doing pretty well. I definitely see the ads everywhere as well.
Yeah. I'm sure there's downsides to it. What would you say is a downside to online therapy versus in-person therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely an effective alternative, in that you're not limited by like geographical location. Some people maybe feel safer being in their own space. But I would say you're limited because you only see like this much, essentially. You don't necessarily see a hand that might be clenched, or a fist that might be clenched, or a leg that might be shaking when we're talking about something. And typically, when I'm in a shared space with someone, you can kind of feel that energy. You notice when, posture changes, or, someone's like twitching or shaking their leg or something, and I would point that out and see what might be what might be going on there.
That's so interesting because I've never thought about therapy as the physical. It was always more about the verbal, like the words I say and how I say it and the tonality. And for you to mention the physical aspect, I'm like, that makes so much sense. Do you think that a person can be helped if they don't want to be helped?
It's a good question. I think it's really tough because I think with making changes, you need to want to make those changes and want to put in the effort and kind of see where you are and where you want to go. And I think if someone doesn't want to be helped, maybe friends or family or people around can only do so much to plant the seed or try to kind of suggest. But I do think there needs to be that openness to, looking within and making some shifts.
So this is just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I think that people want to be helped when they feel like they need it. But the problem is a lot of people feel like they need to reach a rock bottom or something extremely like regarded as like unnormal or weird for them to seek help.
I agree. And that can be tough for friends and family and people to just observe, right? And it's almost like the sense of, okay, we can only do, again, we can support and be there, but they do have to get to a place where they realize actually things need to change, and what's, how I'm living my life doesn't feel kind of meaningful or I'm not happy maybe.
Yeah, so I was reading this book. I forget the book titles. I'm terrible at titles. But in the story of the book, this CEO was getting coached by another CEO, and he was talking to him like, oh, when do you help out your executives? And he said, when there's a fire to put out. And he was like, why don't you help guide them before that? And he said, well, they're executives. I pay them the big bucks for them to know what to do. Why do I have to guide them? Then I don't feel like I'm micromanaging them. And I feel like that's very common with relationships with friends and family, to where you might see it going in a direction of a problem, but if it's not problematic yet, you do not want to address it. But there is certain pieces of advice or guidance you give them to stop them from from that being an actual problem?
So interesting. I mean, so yeah, I think that's so relatable in terms of, people, and when people are kind of, when they're aware that actually something needs to change, and I need to seek help. And but I mean, with seeking help too, I think there can be, I mean, there's a stigma too in certain cultures, and maybe a lack of understanding until someone's at like a crisis point, or like you said, kind of hitting rock bottom. So I guess also different factors too towards kind of making changes, and reaching out. And it can be difficult. I mean, I think facing ourselves too can be
Scary.
the most terrifying thing.
Yeah, I hate looking at myself in the mirror. I'm like, "Ah, this guy again. I gotta see him every single day."
But yeah, I mean, so many layers there. It can be a lot.
Do you think so? Growing up, I wasn't taught financial literacy, right? But now that I see it all around me, people always say like we should have classes on financial literacy in high school. So that way it's embedded in us like early on before we get a job. Do you feel like that's the same with, I wouldn't say specifically therapy, but ways of understanding ourselves and one another? Like how to be a human being?
Yes, I think that's so valuable, and something that we really need from school. I mean, like, I'm trying to think of when I went to school, whether there was much. We had some talks here and there, some speakers come in about, drugs and what not to do. And so some guidance here and there, but I think there's still so much to be done in terms of mental health education. I have noticed in recent years there has been a lot more, which is great, and definitely a move in the right direction. But I think it's, for students, for parents, for educators as well. And because all these messages that we're getting during the formative years are coming from, caretakers, from teachers, from peers. And so really having that knowledge and having helpful tools to manage difficult emotions when they come up, kind of knowing that it's human to feel all these feelings and it's okay.
Yeah, it's super important. And I'm starting to see it more and more frequently in my life to where I don't know how to deal with it because I've never dealt with it prior. And it would have been nice to have some kind of guidance through that just in case, So I have a half brother. He is 18 now, and he's going through those years of his life where he's starting to get frustrated about certain things. He feels like he's not enough. And I don't know how to communicate with them sometimes, And I used to have a very bad temper problem, but it's really dumbed down through the years of me just not liking that about myself.
Okay.
I had to kind of come to terms with, oh, wow, what you're not doing is not harmless. This is hurting people around you.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see that in him. I think that has something to do with our upbringing. Our dad is a guy who likes to shout more than talk.
So like that learned behavior.
And he came up to me one night, and he's been reaching out to me a little bit more. He mentioned something about like he doesn't get this math problem. Like, why doesn't he get it? Like, why is he so stupid? And I just told him, I was like, oh, what have you tried? And he's like, I've tried everything. And it's that feeling of hopelessness where everything's against me. And I asked him, like, did you try this or that? He's like, I've tried everything. Like, as if he doesn't really want to hear what I have to say. It's not about advice at this point. Yeah. It's more about listening. And then he went to the room and, like, slammed his door, And I was like, oh, wow. Like, I felt, it was weird. I almost felt a bit of me from back then came back. Like, I almost wanted to come in and open the door and be like, hey, like, you can't be slamming doors on people like that. But in my head, I was like, I don't think he'll take that. He won't receive it well at this point. He's heated. I'm just going to let him calm down.
I mean, fascinating in terms of, it sounds like you could see like qualities of your younger self, in your brother. And I mean, that's pretty powerful kind of seeing that. And it sounds like you've been a helpful kind of mentor or guide, knowing what he's experienced as well, and figuring out kind of different ways to help. And you're also sensitive to kind of his moods and how he might be feeling in different moments and when to approach certain certain conversations. And
I wish I knew how to handle that, prior to going through it now. I'm very similar to most uncomfortable conversations. As you get older, you have more chances, more experience to go through these things.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to understand how crucial it was to have these conversations early on before they become ingrained in you, or that habit becomes ingrained in you to not talk about it.
Yes. I mean, I think it's amazing that you are able to work through the anger stuff. And how did you come to that realization? Was there like a moment in time, or like a big moment, or just a gradual experience?
There was a couple moments, and it took years to get through this because, my household was very violent, and I saw that in myself as a child. But as a child, I saw it as a sign of strength almost. Like I validated it as like strong men are supposed to be angry, and like if there's an emotion you feel is anger, it's not sadness, right? You puff up your chest and you're like, I'm just gonna go handle this shit.
Yeah.
But then there was a specific moment, I've talked about this a couple times, but I had an ex-girlfriend who I shared what was going on in my household, and she shared that with her mother, and her mother in turns told her, like, be careful for that boy. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. I mean, he could be just like his dad, and I was like, whoa, like, I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want my significant other to fear me.
Sure.
That wasn't like the thing that I thought of about being angry. It wasn't about fear. It wasn't about control. It was about expression.
Yeah.
Like, this is how I let you know that this is how strongly I feel about something, passionate, maybe even. And I was like, wow, I don't want to be viewed like that. And I don't want to believe, because at that age of like 17 years old, I didn't know why I was acting like that.
Yeah.
I just thought it was okay to act like that.
Sure.
And the more I saw it as wrong in certain extremes, I don't think that yelling per se is wrong, but acts of physical harm is almost always wrong. Right. And that was like more concrete to me. It's more polarizing as to what's wrong and what's right.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. And it took me another probably like 10 years to get the vocal range out, like vocal rage out, sorry. Because I had removed all the physical things that I would do, because I would, during that time when I was being mad, the thing that I kind of persuaded myself to think was, as long as I'm not physically harming this person, then it's okay.
Okay.
So I would go destroy things, physical things, right? Like I would break tables and, hit cars and stuff like that. Crazy stuff. And even sometimes self-harm. And, it took me a while to think like, oh, this is not good either. Like people were looking at me like I'm a lunatic, which I was being a lunatic, and I was like, can I control this aspect about myself? So then I was like, okay, what's kind of a healthier outlet? And it was strange to me because my significant other had to bring up to me by saying like, why do you always have to yell? Because she was very soft-spoken. And in turns that made me more mad. And I didn't like that. So I learned to kind of finally walk away from the situation. Because even the way I approached it became different. I used to want to talk through everything. Like if the problem pops up now, we're gonna resolve it now.
Okay.
And finally, when I said, hey, I'm gonna go for a walk, I'll come back when I come back. And when I would go for a walk, I would always feel better. And I would handle the situations better, and I wouldn't yell as frequently. And I was like, okay, this is my approach now.
So to like, let's take a pause. I'm going to calm myself down, take some space, and then come back. Nice.
And it's funny because in that relationship, she was the one who would always want to take a pause. And I didn't want to hear her out. I was like, we're going to do things my way. And then eventually I did things her way, and it actually worked out better. And then I went on to be in another relationship where my significant other wanted to talk things out right then and there, and I became her in a way. Like I learned from that relationship, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna walk away. Like you don't want to see me like this, you know. And maybe there's a way where I can resolve it then and there too, but I'm a kind of guy where it's like I rather take it outside our mind than to test to see if it works. Because there might be harm that like words that I say that I can't take back. And I'd rather not risk that.
So like take the time to process and then come back. And I think that can be so helpful, especially if it feels like things are, pretty heightened and nothing kind of productive is going to come out of a certain conversation.
Yeah.
But it's cool because it sounds like you were wanting to experiment with different ways of working through emotions and could have discovered like a really helpful one. And I think it's also so interesting that we learn so much about ourselves through relationships. And each relationship is an opportunity, I suppose, to discover more about ourselves and how we communicate and what triggers us and to kind of look within and
now that I know these things about relationships, like I'll see my significant other act in certain ways where I'm like, oh, you're projecting right now. And I can see that. Before I never understood. I was like, why are you so mad about me hanging out with my friends? Like, you obviously know what I'm doing. You have my location, things like that. We're on stories. Like, it's obviously that you could trust me. I don't understand why there's this extreme amount of distrust, not based on history,
right,
not based on track record. So then I, would look into, I'm like, oh, that's why, because you're projecting like this. You feel insecure about this because this is what you're doing. And now I could kind of see it. I'm just like, oh, if it doesn't make sense, it makes sense somewhere else.
Yeah.
You just have to look there.
And it's so fascinating, right? It's like people are bringing their own stuff into a relationship, right? And then you've got two people with different backgrounds and conditioning and fears and core beliefs. And it's like, how do we work through that and kind of discover what is our stuff, what's yours, and but how do we find a way to just develop a more understanding about each other and grow.
How do you think we should do that?
I feel like communication is so key, and creating a space for your partner to feel safe to express whatever it is that they're experiencing in different moments, so that both parties feel heard and understood, and because there'll always be misunderstandings and conflict, and I think and sometimes these arguments can actually bring people closer, and I think it's how we communicate that makes all the difference. And so really listening, I would say, and trying to understand from the other person's perspective is key, and I think it's just not so helpful when there's that, like, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, where it's I believe it's like criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling that are really not healthy or helpful in a relationship. And I think that just feels more misunderstanding and feeling kind of disconnected.
Do you mind explaining the four horsemen?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess, defensiveness, if someone brings something up, rather than really hearing the other person out, they're jumping to, that's not my fault, I didn't do this, and, externalizing the blame, maybe. Criticism, just kind of, whether it's attacking someone or putting someone down in different ways. Contempt, I believe it's sort of almost like assuming moral superiority over the other person, so it could be like ridicule or ridiculing or belittling in different ways. And the stonewalling would be like shutting down, withdrawing, walking away, so that there isn't really that safe space to engage and connect. So
I've heard of that before, and it's so interesting because I also heard, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the way you handle these things are from your childhood and from your parents. So how they handle you is how you're going to deal with certain relationships when you grow up.
Yeah. That learned behavior, I think it's so fascinating looking at our childhood experiences and like the messages that I mean, when we're kids during those formative years, we're like sponges, right? And we're constantly taking in messages from parents, caretakers, and then later on like teachers and peers about ourselves and the world, and that just kind of shapes our view. And I think it's so interesting because over time then we start to unconsciously disown certain parts of the self that seemed unacceptable or undesirable, and then we develop these defense mechanisms out of survival, and that's supposed to protect us. But over time in adulthood, we start to realize that these mechanisms are no longer serving us. And in fact, the very things that used to protect us or keep us safe in childhood is actually the thing that's preventing us from feeling connected with others or kind of feeling more seen and understood. So I think it's such an interesting process, like peeling the layers and really unpacking the childhood stuff.
Yeah, that's so scary actually to think about it like that, because I don't think my parents raised me in any methodic way. It was just like, oh, this is what we naturally should do, or what they've learned from their parents. And now that we understand how much what you say and do could affect a child to a degree that, it could be very extreme, or maybe very subtle until like adulthood.
Right.
It makes you rethink about your approach to parenthood, right? Like, I don't care to have kids, but I see a lot of my friends having kids, and I try to learn about these things because I don't want to have kids of my own. I have siblings, and I want to be a positive influence for like the younger future.
Yeah.
So I'm like more conscious about it if I can be.
I think that's so great. Yeah. I mean, just like reflecting on the parenting or how we were raised and how we want to kind of shift that or repeat certain kind of forms of guidance, I suppose. And I definitely reflect on that quite a bit as well. And
because as a kid, I think it's also hard to distinguish the communication that your parents are trying to give you, because they're really speaking another language, a language that you don't quite understand.
Yeah.
So when you say to your child, that's bad, to them, they don't understand how negative that is. Like, it could be kind of bad. Is it really bad? Should I never do it again? And in certain ways because I've heard that when parents kind of constrain their child because like, oh, throwing your food around is bad or whatever, it almost diminishes a flame in them that naturally would have aligned before. Because now it's like, oh, this is the voice that I heard from my parents, not the voice that in my inner child like told me it's okay. Yeah. But then that becomes blown out of proportion to other things, like as you grow up, and it could be way bigger than they think that's bad that you threw around food. And to me, I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. So in a way, you're saying like it's hard to know the extent of how bad something is, and to kind of get a sense of when to just stop certain behaviors forever, or just kind of limit it.
Yeah, because a lot of times parents don't tell you exactly why. Yeah. Right? To really reason with you, like, oh, how bad? It's just like, oh, that's bad. You should quit it. Okay, well, does that mean I should never play with food? Right. And it does affect people like that to that extent, which is crazy because you don't want to think that that's how impactful you are to your child at that time. But there's so many things that just a little tweak might change their whole life forever.
It's true. It's huge. And so I think, like you said, kind of explaining certain reasons for like rules or why something is bad is so helpful. And I mean, as you were talking about that, I was thinking of the idea of shaming behaviors too with parents. And, over time, kids can start to think, well, then I am bad versus, other situations. Like I'm thinking of guilt versus shame, right? Where shame says I am bad, and guilt is I did something bad, which can be more helpful, right? In terms of like making more positive or meaningful change and reflecting on behaviors. But shame can be really destructive if it's sort of I guess, toxic in that way, and we could see like we're flawed in some way.
Yeah. And I can imagine that's very hard for a child to distinguish between, because as you were describing it, I'm not going to lie, I didn't know the difference between the two. I almost thought they were one and the same. So to hear that, even as an adult now, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, that makes sense. So I want to talk to you about mental health and relationships as far as romantic ones, because I think they're a big contributor to mental health issues, but also mental health as in the positive side of it. How would you say like romantic relationships affect mental health in the negative way?
Definitely can affect us positively or negatively depending on the type of relationship and whether it's healthy or not. In terms of how it can affect us negatively, I think if we're in a situation, well, I'm thinking of abusive relationships for one, where it can really chip away at our self-esteem, make us feel all sorts of emotions like fear and feeling not good enough. And, you know, over time, it can be quite subtle too in terms of the abuse. Doesn't necessarily have to be just physical, but the emotional abuse of, constant criticisms or, because of triggering one in different ways. And I think over time, we may not even realize until we're quite far into the relationship that it's really affecting us in different ways. And so that would be one. You know, that cycle can be tricky, and getting out of an abusive relationship can be really hard as well. I actually worked at a domestic violence shelter during my training.
Oh, wow.
And, hearing the stories of these women, these women are so resilient and so strong, and but it was, it can be so tough, and often people who are abusive can be so charming and be so different in front of, friends, family, but once you're behind closed doors, it can be a very different story. And so there's that, and then, that cycle of there's a buildup of tension, then the abuse happens, and then there's the person will apologize profusely and say, I'll never do this again, I'm going to change, and then there's the honeymoon phase again, and so there's a continuation of that cycle. And
that's scary. That's so
that
scary.
Can be really, really hard. And I think often, if there's a link if it's familiar, I think that can be very scary as well, in terms of some of these patterns and what one's relationship with a parent was like. Because, when it feels familiar, it's hard to identify the red flags. And sometimes these abusive comments can feel so real because it's something that you've heard before, and it's kind of deeply ingrained and, as a kid. And so, that can be really difficult and certainly a negative in terms of mental health and how that can affect someone.
Oh, that's tough because, I've also known a lot of people like that, my family included. And the women that I have seen get out of it, my mom specifically, is very resilient. Even though she's very soft, but she's very resilient. Like, you would never guess the hardships she just had to go through. But I think this question is personal to me because, I didn't know how to tell my mom to call it quits. Like, how do you discern between if it's worth it to continue this or right then and there, that's a deal breaker? Because I think it's very easy to discern between when it's a deal breaker or not. When it's a physical act of violence, it's almost like everyone knows, right? Like, oh, she got a black eye. Okay, no, you should get the fuck out of that relationship.
It's dangerous.
Right? There's
it's
no
not
going
healthy.
back.
Yeah.
But how do you do it when it's emotional abuse?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I think it's so subtle, and it's hard to, it can be hard to know, whether that should be the end of it. I mean, you mentioned this sense of you found it hard to know when to tell your mom? Were you a kid at the time?
I was. So there was an instance where at one point, my parents were separated for, I think, about 8 years, where when she finally did leave, because while they were separated, they still lived in the same house.
Yeah.
It wasn't until one night she asked me, like, what should I do? Like, I'm kind of scared for my life.
Wow.
Like, what should I do? And I told her, I was like, you need to leave. You need to go.
Yeah.
Because at that point, my rose-colored glasses were completely shattered at that point. Because when I was a kid, I used to be very, I don't know what's the word for it, but I used to believe in romance to the fullest. You grow up on Disney stuff, like Aladdin, and then...
Happily ever after.
Yeah, and I would always tell my parents, I think I've always been manipulative, even as a kid, but I would tell them, like, if you guys fight each other, I'm going to leave and you guys will never find me again. Because I would just want them to work things out. I felt so strongly about their relationship, and I felt like this is what love is supposed to be like.
Yeah.
And, when I realized, because it was like abuse that was ongoing for a while, I was like, okay, this is not what love is supposed to be like.
Yeah.
And as much as they possibly do love each other, this is not healthy. And it's actually better for them to split.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's incredible. I mean, the fact that as a kid you were already, I mean, that's a lot of responsibility to kind of, share that or influence that decision. But also the fact that it was clear to you that, you know what, this isn't healthy and this, you should leave. I think that was clearly an indication of, okay, you're realizing this is not a safe environment. It's not, helpful for anyone, and it's just affecting people negatively. And wow, that's a lot.
I'm sure this is very common too, but I'm 100% positive they probably wouldn't have stayed together for so long if they didn't have kids together. I think that was one of the reasons, was they wanted to be together for our kids, but they didn't realize it was doing more harm than good.
Yeah.
I would leave my house frequently because I did not want to be around it. Because when I was really young, like I would say 8 to 11 or 12, I was able to distract myself from it because I would just go on and play video games. And then they would involve me after a certain age. So they would be in the same room that I'm playing video games in when they had their own room to fight out in, because they would use me as a medium to see who was more right or wrong. Like,
you were just triangulated in this situation. Wow.
Caught in the crossfire, like, look at what your mom did. Look at what your dad did. I'm like, right. I don't know what the hell you guys are actually doing. I don't really want to be involved. Like, I mentioned it before, I was too small to physically restrain anyone. And I didn't fully understand the situation enough. I don't think I could have during that time, because in certain ways, they're both villainizing each other. They're going to paint the picture that they're the better parent. And that, I don't know. I can't discern between what's true and what's not.
Sure. And it's also not your place to kind of be involved in those arguments, ideally. Right?
Yeah.
So that must have been really hard to feel like either you had to take a stance or take a side, or...
Taking a side was the biggest thing. Like, when I was younger, my parents always wanted me to take a side. And it was so hard.
Of course.
Like, I felt like, because my mom was so soft in the way she approached things, that this must be right. And that my dad was so aggressive that I thought that was wrong. And I remember one time when my mom was like, you can either leave with me or stay here with your dad. And she brought me to, I think it was like a family member's house. And we stayed there for a couple days. And, this was like almost 20 years ago. So maybe, almost 30 years ago, if anything. And so there weren't like cell phones and stuff. We just had landlines. And my dad, when he found out where we were, he like grabbed everyone and took us back home. And he made me refer to him as uncle. Like, I'm not your dad, I'm your uncle. Because in Vietnamese, when you call someone who's like older male, you usually use this word Jew.
Okay.
Like, don't call me like dad, call me, So it almost reinforced the fact that I thought my mom was correct, because it made me feel so unwanted.
Sure.
As a child. Like, oh, he doesn't accept me as a son anymore.
I'm not dad anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's huge. And, we were talking about earlier how, certain things that parents say or certain behaviors can really impact someone for a very long time and be so deeply ingrained and like affect our beliefs. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I mean,
Yeah, of course. I just remembered that right now too. It's been so long.
But that's a lot to take in, and I guess you were talking about the like emotional versus physical, and like physical being, I mean, a really obvious one. I guess the emotional abuse, because it can really creep up on us. It's I think I'd really taking those pauses and being able to reflect and think, is this, like, why am I in this? Am I feeling fulfilled? Are my needs being met? Do I feel safe? Do I feel heard? Do I feel like this is a partnership where I can feel held and I can grow? And or is it something that's actually keeping me feeling trapped or making me feel worse in different ways? And I was just thinking of this idea of repetition compulsion and therapy, and how sometimes we find partners that have similar qualities to a parent.
Yeah.
And we're like subconsciously hoping that if we can resolve this issue, or if we can fix this situation, and maybe my partner can love me unconditionally, then I can resolve this issue with the parent. And so I think doing that inner work and growing in more like understanding and awareness of, what's happening, how am I feeling, what do I need, are my needs being met in this relationship? Maybe that could be helpful in terms of knowing when it's time to leave and when you want to stay and work on it.
So you mentioned doing inner work. Can you break that down in the way where it's like actionable for people? Because I think, I believe that inner work needs to be done, but I think inner work might look different for everyone. But maybe there's a way that academic approaches it.
Yeah, I guess there's so many different ways to do the inner work, whether it's kind of on your own, or sometimes it can be helpful to have, that safe space in a therapy session and to be guided in that way. But I think paying attention to childhood experiences, some, let's say even early childhood memories, what comes up, and what memories have really stuck with you. What are some, whether it's traumas, or what are some beliefs that you've developed based on, your conditioning, and how has that affected you? And how has that continued to, how does that continue to affect you in the present? And I think kind of being able to investigate with compassion, of course, is really helpful. I think it's also interesting to think about, where did I tie, or how did I tie my self-esteem, or what did I tie my self-esteem to as a kid? Was it achievements or, different things like that? And then thinking about, well, what did I really need in difficult moments as a kid, and what can I give to myself now? And so often it's, a hug or words of encouragement or kindness. And so I think from doing that processing and investigating and being curious, we can have certain realizations and develop more like self-compassion.
Yeah, that's so hard though.
It is.
It's so difficult because I do believe in self-compassion, self-love.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of us want external validation, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't give yourself a hug, so that's always difficult.
Yeah.
I get scared for the youngest generation out right now, just because I feel like we were in the transition phase where it's like half of our life we didn't really have technology.
Yeah.
Or not technology, but like cell phones and things that connect us as strongly as the internet did. And a lot of the youth is going to grow up with that. Do you think that causes any kind of negative issues?
Yeah, I think about that often, and I'm, I feel grateful that we grew up at the time that we did because, as a kid, I remember doing a lot of creative work and, writing stories or just using my imagination or going outside, and that felt really important in terms of developing the imagination, just being with people. And I think with technology, in many ways, it can be so helpful if used in the right ways. But I also think there's so many pressures. And with social media, we are often posting like that kind of highlight reel, right? We want to post, us on vacation or us looking great. And so there's this constant pressure to live up to certain expectations, or a sense that everyone else is blissfully happy, or everyone else has such a great life and I'm the only one struggling or dealing with difficult stuff. And so I think it could really add so much stress. It could affect our self-esteem in terms of living up to certain ideals or even kind of body image, like certain kind of looks, weight, all of that. And so I think there can be a lot of difficulties, and it can certainly help. I mean, certainly not help with our mental health. And
Definitely. Going back to what you were talking about earlier, shame versus guilt. Like I'll go on my social media and then, I'll make mistakes of posting things that maybe I shouldn't, like me drinking too much or something. And then the next day I'll wake up to like the feeling of guilt of it, but I'll let it sit. Like I'll let it sit because I'm like, okay, like this is really me. This is the reality. It's not representing me in the best of lights, but why did I do this? Is it okay? I leave it also to let people know, like, yeah, this does happen.
yeah,
Right? I'm not perfect by any means. And
you just
I think,
kind of being real and you're showing.
Yeah, I think that's hard for a lot of people because the internet is a mean place.
Yes.
And people can be shamed to where they might feel like a bad person for sharing something. Because I don't know why we have these trolls on the internet. I feel like another social issue that I can't explain. But yeah, it makes it really hard for people to be honest and real, and people are validated by their highlights, right? So therefore they're more likely to do that, which is now feeding into this problem of people comparing themselves, right? We had a guest who came on and she was talking about how her little brother, who's like 21, 22, I think, how he's watching all these influencers who are his age or even younger, 17, 18, who are millionaires and like,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
oh, I want to be a millionaire. They did it younger than I am. Now I feel like I'm not enough. And
Like the comparisons.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, nowadays to be a millionaire at 17, 18, that really was very rare back in the day, but kind of seeing that now, I mean, just like you said, the pressures and the comparisons is a lot. But like you said, the trolls too. Social media can be a main place of cyberbullying. Like people can pick on all sorts of things and feel like, you know what, I can say whatever because I can be anonymous, or I'm behind a screen and it doesn't matter. And so, yeah, I think kind of really regulating our use and following the right account, helpful or healthy accounts can really help. But it is tough.
it is tough. But there are gems too, right? I feel it's weird because now the youth, like these feelings are exasperated. So they're now finding helpful channels like way earlier on. Like I see a lot of people looking through therapy channels and they're like, oh, I'm 17, I'm going to high school, I'm dealing with these issues. Like I'm glad I found your channel.
Great.
And those channels are being pushed more because there's like a need.
Yeah. And I love hearing that because what I have noticed, I think, is like more media representation of whether it's going to therapy or certain mental health struggles. And I do feel like there's been with that awareness and with more of that representation on film, TV, it's really kind of normalized. Going through all sorts of stuff, and that it's okay to seek help, and it's important to, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually really a sign of strength to do so.
How can we change that narrative that being vulnerable is not being weak? I feel like that's tough. Like, what's the solution to all this?
It's a good question. I mean, it's so hard because of, I'm thinking of what's been passed on like generationally as well, and so I mean, this idea of vulnerability being linked to weakness is it's definitely a misconception, and something that I'm thinking about like masculinity and how and like the socialization of that, like you mentioned, this kind of anger felt like an acceptable emotion to express, not so much sadness and so on. But I think when we aren't able to express vulnerability, there's a sense that we're not able to fully experience, I want to say, joy, belonging, like courage, creativity, authenticity. I really think it's the birthplace of vulnerability, but so often it's tied to feelings of shame or feeling not enough, or rejection maybe, or disappointment, that it's so scary to put ourselves out there. And so I think more people, more celebrities, more influential people kind of sharing their struggles, or just being open, sharing their true feelings, being vulnerable, I think that all can really help. But definitely a lot to do there in terms of working through some of those misconceptions, I guess, or the stigma there.
Yeah, that's tough. So I have to ask you this question now, because since we're talking about it, what are some things that you had to deal with in your life, some struggles that you felt like you had to be vulnerable and come to terms with?
Yeah. It's a great question in this moment as we're talking about vulnerability, because I think I've really struggled with being vulnerable. And I've had to do a lot of work on that over the past maybe decade.
Oh, wow.
And when I was a kid, so I was a highly sensitive kid, and anything that felt like a slight criticism or would really upset me, and I would just start crying. When I was a toddler, I would cry all the time, but then once I started becoming aware of myself and my surroundings and other people, I started to realize that actually maybe I shouldn't be crying so much, or maybe it meant there was something wrong with me, and it was very much tied to shame. So I would start to hide whenever I would cry, and so I definitely over time, I would say, subconsciously developed defense mechanisms to stop the flow of emotions. And whether it's allowing my mind to come through and to present different thoughts to take me out of a certain moment or emotion, or my body would just physically tense up and stop that, because I had moments where I felt so out of control. I remember when I was a kid, so I had some eye issues when I was very young, like a lazy eye, when I was 3 years old. And so I did a lot of visual training. It was something I had to do daily. And what was at the time, the threat was, if it doesn't work out, you'll have to have eye surgery, and which now not a huge thing, but I guess at the time as a kid, it felt like the scariest thing to me. And so there was always the sense of, I have to control my eyes, or I have to do something so that I don't have to go through surgery or experience that. And there were quite a few times where I remember sitting at the optometrist's office and hearing that my eyes have deteriorated, and I would just cry hysterically and uncontrollably. And I just have an image of like the doctors kind of standing there, not really knowing what to do, and it just felt so humiliating in different ways. So I would say tying that back to vulnerability, that was hard because over time I kept it very safe in terms of, or I felt very protected, and I could talk about my emotions, but often it was hard for me to really show a lot. And I noticed that in like even romantic relationships over time. And so I would really hold back because there was this fear or belief that I was too much, or I was too emotional, too sensitive. And so it's been a journey, I guess, of working through that and embracing that part of the self. And, you know, I think it felt like a curse in many ways growing up, but I'm starting to see it more as like a superpower in ways too, especially with therapy work and maybe with the arts as well.
I feel like the most sensitive people excel in the arts because you just have that sensitivity where you know, like, this is beautiful or it's not, or it's driving this emotion, which maybe other people can't detect yet. So I think that's great that you're kind of combining your passions together. It kind of works out.
I mean, it's funny that I'm in professions where it's all about emotions and giving permission to feel them.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I know you talked about this a little bit before, how it is like mind, body, and I guess for like a better word, soul or emotion, because how you feel could affect yourself like physically.
Yeah.
Like the tenseness or the looseness. I think it's like so interesting because we tend to ignore the signs because we're like, oh, well, I don't really feel like this, but then it's showing up on your body somehow.
Yes.
Right. And now I've done some research where it's also the things you consume. So aside of just how you express your emotions and how you take care of yourself physically, it's the things you consume, right? What do you think about like drugs for therapy?
Do you mean like psychedelics? Or?
Whether it's ketamine or psychedelics or any of those things.
I think it's really fascinating. I am curious to learn more about it. I've heard a lot of stories from friends, even clients who've done certain psychedelics and really experienced profound, had some profound experiences and healed a lot of their traumas or were able to shift certain perspectives on a very deep level. And so I think there's certainly something there in terms of healing, and I'm like definitely very interested to learn more about it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, huh? Now that we think about it, like, being used for healings, or like healing properties versus recreational use. It's like, wow, who would have thought? And people talk about it all the time, but it's almost like we didn't want to believe it. I don't know why that is, whether it's from the media or just like certain stigmas that we grew up with. But it's funny, I actually just talked about this the other day. I've had a lot of guests who come on and they talk to me about manifestation. And I'm not very spiritual at all. So to me, it was almost like woo-woo, like I don't really understand it. But they'll tell me I'll just write something that I believe down every single day and it happened. And it's better than I ever imagined, right? And I saw someone explain it like scientifically that what your brain does is it loves to like fill in gaps. So if you manifest or you dream of like your dream life, if you think about it hard enough and often enough, your brain is wired to fill these gaps in like what you're supposed to do. It's almost like reverse engineering it, but like subconsciously.
Yeah.
And then I thought about like placebos, right? You know, for people who don't know what placebos are, they're not the real versions of the drug. Sometimes they're just sugar pills, but sometimes it also works. So you're taking not the drug that's supposed to heal you, but this fake one, And somehow some people actually get the healing properties, which in a way to me, it almost sounds like manifesting because you believe it so strongly that it comes true. And I'm like, whoa, this is kind of strange.
Yes, it's so interesting that you talk about that because I've been so curious about manifesting. I've been trying it a little
Oh,
bit.
really?
As well.
Yeah, you need to.
Because it's like, why not, right? It
Yeah.
can't hurt, and why not test it out and see how it, see what happens. But over time, I've really, I'm really realizing just the power of our thoughts and this idea that like every cell in our body is listening to our thoughts. So I started reading a lot about how people, did certain manifestations and meditations. I was reading about Dr. Joe Dispenza and some of his, like I was looking at the different testimonials, and some people healed themselves from like stage 4 cancers and so on just from doing some of these practices. So I mean, there's definitely something there in terms of thoughts and energy and the mind-body connection and being really clear about what we want and what we're putting out into the universe.
It's like stress, right? You have the opposite where stress is almost like manifesting like your sicknesses, right? Your ailments. Like some people stress so much that they get sick.
Yeah.
And they're more prone to all these things. So it's like the opposite of manifestation, right? When you look for something positive. So it's like, your body's always been telling us that. We've always kind of known, but I think only up until recently, we're putting it more out scientifically, right? Because people have been able to tell you that stress kills for a long time now.
Yeah.
But it's very rare that they tell you like, oh, positive feelings and thoughts actually could heal.
Yes. And I think with that scientific evidence, people are really starting to understand it because, like you said, maybe it could be woo-woo. It's hard to really believe that, but seeing that evidence is, I think that's very helpful. And I really do believe that we have the power to heal ourselves. Obviously, some illnesses are it's not always the case, right? And it's kind of finding a way to combine whether it's medication if necessary and different ways to, develop more positive thoughts to kind of really create I guess, an environment for healing. But definitely powerful stuff. I actually struggled with chronic headaches for about 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And
that's a long time.
Yeah. It started in college and went to all sorts of doctors to figure out what might be going on and did MRI scans, went to different neurologists and they couldn't find anything. And, a doctor even told me, everything's fine, just go to a spa. And I know it's on the one hand, like, okay, maybe I understand. Yes, you're telling me to relax more and take it easy, which is valuable, but also it felt a little invalidating in terms of, it's not really a big thing. Just go to a spa, all will be fine.
You might as well just say it's all in your head.
Right, exactly. And I think that can be a real struggle for some people dealing with like more psychosomatic issues. And so, I guess I did a lot through working on whether it's anxiety and, some lifestyle changes that has definitely helped with the chronic headaches. So pretty interesting with the mind-body connection and how certain like emotional struggles can manifest physically.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've seen people like they're locked up. So, I have friends who are they'll do chiropractic work and, they have these people and weirdly enough, all my friends in chiropractic work, they all also do something on an emotional level.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll speak about it like, oh, did you go through something that has to do with this? Because I'm feeling this part of your body. Which to me, I was like, oh, that's kind of woo-woo, but they all say it. So I'm like, oh, this is weird. So how do you guys come to the same conclusion, And I haven't read this book fully yet, but one of the books my friend recommends me is called The Body Keeps Score, I think.
Yeah.
And it talks about things like that, where it could manifest in different ways that you don't even really notice. And I think that's very interesting because for me, I've been using, I don't want to say, this is for lack of a better word. I'm ignorant. So what I would call manifesting is that I practice like gratitude pretty often.
Yeah.
So I'll write every day like 3 things that I'm grateful for, you know, and I'll really, really think about it.
Yeah.
And it actually makes my day better, you know?
Yes.
And I think it's just me giving time to really think about it and believe it could really elevate the way I feel in a real way, you know?
Yeah. No, I love that you're saying that, because I've been practicing gratitude a lot more lately too, and definitely feel a big shift. Actually helps feel like calmer, more present. And I think regardless of what we're going through, we can always find something that we can be grateful for. So I do think it's been such a helpful practice. It's just that like starting the day with a certain like mindset can be, yeah, I really feel like it can be powerful in terms of how it helps the rest of the day.
Yeah. Even when I feel like I have hard times, I'll do that. So during a shitty day, I'll be like, wow, the air is really nice, or the sun is really nice out right now. I appreciate that. I'm grateful for to be able to do this, like the little things. And it really helps. It puts a lot of other things into perspective.
Yeah.
So all the really big positive things, right, that people think is more glaring, like, oh, I love the people in my life. I'm so grateful for my friends.
Yeah.
It's almost like it magnifies that feeling for them when you could appreciate the really small things. Like the ability that I could go out and have a walk, you know, take a walk for like 20 minutes is not everyone gets to do this.
For sure. I think that's really powerful, just like shift that perspective. And there's also a sense of like, there's a mindful aspect to that as well, in terms of like taking a slight step back and observing, you know, what we're feeling in certain moments or our thoughts. And I think when we're in that place where we're not fused with it, that can be so helpful in terms of having the space to see things in a different way, or to have things feel more manageable, and to even break some patterns. I'm just thinking of that image of, it's like rather than being always like caught up in the waves, we can be like the whole ocean, and just kind of observing the thoughts, the emotions, everything that's going on, without kind of judging it. Obviously easier said than done, but a helpful practice.
It is so difficult. It is so difficult because a lot of these ideas seem very abstract. It's very easy to take a pill, you know, X amount of milligrams, but to really be present and, let's say, meditate and pay attention to the breath, it could be a foreign language to a lot of people. So I've been meditating now for, I want to say, like a year, just like 10 minutes a day. And only until, I want to say, like 2 or 3 months ago did I actually enjoy it. Really weird.
That's great that you persisted despite not enjoying it for so long.
Yeah, it took a while because a lot of people that would watch, well, there's both ranges. There's ranges of people like, oh, I felt great right away. And there's people who said, it took me like half a year to get there. So I was like, okay, well, it's not, I'm also a person that I don't mind not getting results right away. Instant gratification is not that big of a deal to me. Like, it's nice once in a while, don't get me wrong. I'm still human. but working my way and enjoying the process is totally fine too. And I think that was, and I'm sorry, when I say enjoying the process, I mean struggling to get there is okay too. Because I know some things take hard work, and you know, it took me like over 9 months to a year to get there, to where in the morning I would wake up and think like, okay, can't wait to do this meditation.
Nice. So like the mindset shift of, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm excited about it. Very impressive that you stuck with it. I feel like starting a new habit is the hardest part, and I'm just likening it to like going to the gym, where it's an effort to really get ourselves to the gym, but once we're there and we're working out, I guess it could be a struggle, but for the most part we feel better after. And sometimes you don't like see the results for some time, but maybe a month later is something you really kind of notice the difference. So that's really cool that you've stuck with the meditation practice. And you're finding it helpful. It's
really strange because I didn't even think that I would enjoy it. I was like, okay, I'm just supposed to do this. That's actually what I thought. My mindset was like, okay, I'll just keep on going because I'm supposed to do this. and I don't know what I'm gonna find, but I'm supposed to. So let me stick it out and see what happens. And then I remember the morning where I felt like doing it was the strangest thing. I was like, okay, I can't wait to sit here and do nothing.
Yeah. That's cool. It sounded like it shifted to like, this is my sacred time in the morning, and actually it feels good.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest changes I made too, maybe that coincides with the reason why I feel better about it, was I started to write about my meditations. So before, I would just feel things and think of things. Everything that would be in the back of my mind would pop up, intrusively.
Yeah.
And I would just go on my day. I'm like, okay, that was the 10 minutes I spent. That's fine. And then when I started writing out on paper, I was like, why am I feeling this? Some things are about things that hasn't happened yet, the future, And I noticed that it comes with a lot of anxious feelings when I think about the future. Like, oh, though I still haven't done this. I need to do this.
Right.
And I would feel that. And some things would be about like the past. Right? I'm like, why am I thinking about this person? Or why am I thinking about this negative time? Or why is this feeling of like anger coming to me when I think about this?
Yeah.
And, I tried to think about it as like, oh, I haven't addressed these things. Maybe that's why they're still coming up. Like either I need to address it or I need to let go of the thought. And then sometimes I'm in the present, which is different, right? And I'll gauge how my meditation is based on those things, like thoughts of the future, thoughts of the past, and the present.
That's so cool that you were really just exploring. It sounded like you're really curious just to see like where your mind is at any given day during the meditation. Just like journal or write it down, explore and investigate, which is really cool. Because I think so often people think, well, when you meditate, you shouldn't have any thoughts that come
Think
through.
nothing.
Right, which is so hard, right? And then when we try to push the thoughts away, they try to come back even stronger, and then it becomes this battle. So I love that you're just staying curious and kind of allowing and seeing what comes up, and kind of accepting that, which is so key.
I think that's actually the problem a lot of people have, is allowing these things to go through you, right? Like, why are you feeling like this now? Like, why do you feel anxious? Why are you thinking about the future so much? Why are you thinking about the past so much? Why can't you be present? People don't want to question those things. It's it's like how you're saying, they just want to push it away. Like, I need to focus, but why can't I focus? Maybe there's something you need to address.
Yep.
And kind of lean in on that.
For sure. And that, like, I'm thinking about you talking about a lot of people. Well, most of us would ideally just like, you take a pill and everything's great, and we don't need to spend years trying to figure things out and go through pain and so on. But actually, I'm thinking of like the instant gratification bit, but also how, it can be so rewarding. I mean, so painful but and uncomfortable, but also so rewarding to go through that process and actually get to the root cause of what's going on and like clear it, have it move through us, and clear space for more like meaningful experiences and positive emotions. And I think that has to be the process of, it's like that quote, the only way out is through. And I really believe that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I want to say, no, I think I know this for certain. I think this is one of the few things I do know for certain. It's going to be a journey, like a lifelong journey, right? I think going back to the childhood things where it's like people tell you should be a certain way, finding alignment with your true self is going to be a lifelong journey, because things are going to pop up, outside influences are going to be in front of you. And now you got to really question, is that really me or is it not?
Right.
And if it really is me, like, how do I lean in on that more? And can you even, because there's some things that people think or want to say or want to do, and they feel shame to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're constantly evolving as humans. So it's so true. It's like a lifelong journey of discovery, and trying to get to what feels most authentic for me. And I think it's so hard, especially with different, like our upbringing, a sense of, is this what I want to do, or is this what I think I should do? And how do I know, or how do I gain clarity over what my needs are, or what other people might want for me. Or
Yeah. Have you had that light bulb moment before?
I have, yes. I think I'm constantly. I can't say it's all like fully clear as such, but it's definitely big. I've definitely gained a lot of clarity over the years. Growing up in Hong Kong, and a lot of it is like busyness is glorified, and the status and achievements and all of that, and so, or kind of money making, and I guess over time, I always knew as when I was younger that the arts, kind of community service, mental health, that was all very important to me. But after college, it was a bit confusing because I was torn between finding something that was very stable and that would bring in like financial success quite quickly versus going another route that may be more unpredictable, but that I was more passionate about. So I think it has taken trying different careers and being in different fields to gain clarity over what it is that I really want. And for quite some time, I thought, oh, this was just such a waste of time. I put in so much effort, and it was a failure maybe. And but I'm starting, I've been starting to see, I guess, everything as what can I gain from this experience, or what are the lessons learned. And I think knowing what we don't want can be just as valuable as knowing what we do want.
Yeah.
And that will definitely help with finding clarity.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with experience, right? It's how you mentioned, like, we learn so much about ourselves in relationships.
Yeah.
Because it actually puts our beliefs to the test and our morals to the test, where we say we're like this person, but then in a relationship we're not, and that just, you gotta be honest about yourself,
right?
Like, I guess we weren't this person.
Yeah.
Right? Because we want to, I wouldn't say everyone, but I think a lot of people want a virtue signal, right? I'm a good person. I would never do this. I would never do that. And then when it's put to the test, all of a sudden you reveal your true self, and you're like, oh shit, there's some things that I really have to go back and reassess.
Yes, and there's a lot of gray area, or depending on certain situations, or what you're dealing with internally, different sides might come out, or their different needs, or might surprise yourself.
I've seen too many people say that they're not jealous. Like, oh, I'm not a jealous person. I'm like, oh, really? Then I see them like, oh, what happened to not being jealous? I've never had someone make me feel jealous before. I'm like, oh, okay, well, really, maybe you should really look at that. Right. Like, is it really because this person's making you feel jealous, or is it something that you actually feel within that you just never addressed in that way? Or no one's ever called you out on it? That's another thing, too.
That's true. Or like, what makes someone feel potentially insecure, or like what's triggering. And I've definitely heard that too. And then over time, it's slightly different.
Exactly. I think that's just what it is. You got to face the music sometimes. And that's why, and this is just my own personal opinion, I think people shouldn't be so strong on what their type is. I think at the baseline of just morals and ethics, yes, of course, mention that.
Yeah.
But don't be like, I'm looking to date like a 6'7" black dude. Like, whoa, that's so specific.
Very
you know what
specific,
I mean? What if the guy that you end up liking doesn't look like that?
Right.
Or I don't date anyone shorter than me. You know what I mean? I think there's certain preferences that hold up stronger, because some people could be that vain, to be honest. But like, why pigeonhole yourself into what your type is and what you like, you know? And funny enough, and this is just my observation, more oftentimes than not, it's always wrong. They always end up with someone that does not look like what they thought their ideal person was.
Yes, so true. And like staying open to that. And there's so many other like factors that play into it, in terms of like, maybe there's a certain type of chemistry or connection or a shared experience. So and I wonder how much of that kind of evolves over time, but totally agree in terms of not like limiting oneself to that, because you never know what else is out there.
And a lot of those beliefs usually people set when they're younger, when you don't know yourself, when you haven't met other people typically, right? Because generally you grow up with a certain group of people that's the same for a while, unless you move around, which doesn't apply to you, but then that's all you know. right? You're a product of your environment. And then when you explore different things that you've never explored before, different people, you come to realize, oh, I actually like this aspect of this person that I never knew because I didn't grow up around it, right?
So true.
So allowing yourself those experiences and being open is, I feel the best way to get those experiences early on. Because if you were to say that this is my only type, most likely you're gonna sway away from people who are not that.
Right. And then if it's focused on, like you said, appearance, for example, which is okay if you have obviously a certain,
of course,
preferences, but if there aren't like qualities of what you're looking for, that can get tricky in terms of, I suppose, who we're dating and if there's certain patterns there or,
And it's funny because then you'll also see people who stick to just their type and they're always like, why is it not working out?
Why am I always dating the bad boys? And for some reason, I'm not feeling that safe or connected.
Why do I feel like always jealous around this person or insecure? Well, you're always dating the same kind of guys. Like, what can I say?
Right.
Or you're always dating the same kind of girls.
Exactly,
And then when you're really vain, you can actually try to overlook all those things. It's like, oh, but this person's so hot. Damn, really?
But I am really attracted, so it's okay.
So it's okay. You almost justify it.
Right.
Like, that's pretty insane. Because I don't know when it changed to where we praise vanity. Like, don't get me wrong. Yeah, have your physical preferences.
Sure, yeah.
But if that's what you're only about, like, that's so strange. Maybe because I didn't grow up with people like that, where it was just all looks. I think every single one of my friends can admit that personality sways them a lot, especially now. I think a lot of us have become less vain as
we get older. And I mean, it's so true when you said usually those types develop from a younger time. And typically that was how we, as teenagers, I think that was how we described it. And sometimes I guess it carries over for much longer. And then others, like you said, realize kind of personality is a big one as well. And and I guess sometimes we can, looks over time, it can fade or but it's that connection that's key.
And people always strive for connection. Like, no one can deny that. Not a single person.
For sure.
And going back to like looks will fade and how you have to have a type where people will ask you when you're younger or who do you imagine yourself being with, it's almost like that old question you get when you're a child too, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And these questions, well, I understand why people ask it, kind of pigeonholes you into this idea for a long time, right? Already, you ask a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? You're already forcing them into like an age range of how long they have to believe that for.
Right.
And I think it's very similar when you ask, like, what is your type? And it's funny because, again, going back to a lot of people just describe the physical. It's almost like what we were talking about before when it comes to like, sorry, I hate to compare it to this, but like domestic abuse and emotional abuse. It's almost like that because it's easier to describe someone physically than, what you want about, what do you like about their morals and their ethics. And that requires a lot more thought, right? It's a lot less primal, I feel like.
And more kind of clear cut with the physical side of things. Yeah, that's very interesting. So now does it sound like your type has just evolved into something kind of more open and based on qualities? And
so this is where I'm going to sound like a complete hypocrite. I've only dated Asian girls, and they're all Vietnamese.
Okay.
So, it's not like I wasn't open-minded to other, like, significant others or just dating other people. It was just what was presented to me,
Yeah.
And, it's like I'm here I am encouraging people to, like, expand your horizons, but all I've known is that.
Sure. But I also get, like, there could be, like, the cultural element there and a connection in that way. And so, That doesn't sound just like a physical appearance thing, but yeah.
So it's more it just so happens to be like that. Yeah. But I am open. Like I speaking about being open, like I only recently became more open to like dating. So after my last relationship, I was on like a single spree where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna not date. I'm not even gonna talk to anyone.
Okay.
Like I'm just gonna worry about myself and what I want to do.
Space, focus on you.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many things I want to do, and I can't imagine bringing anyone into this. Not to say that I'll ever not be a work in progress, but currently right now, really under construction, you know, really like we just started this project. Like give me some time to build the foundation first.
Yeah.
And then maybe, allow people into my life. And I think that's just where I'm at now, because I also think that it's crucial to date so that you get better at dating and also get better at knowing how to talk to people and kind of vet people too. Right, because you know, like I said, when I was younger, I used to believe in romance to the degree of like a Disney movie, and now I think like, I've had some people that I've loved in my life, and it's okay to not get it down right away. You know what I mean? It's okay to get rejected. Like it's okay to go on bad dates.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think it all comes from experience, and I do think like with every relationship, you get a sense of, you know, maybe what you're looking for in the next, and also an opportunity to kind of work on the self in different ways if anything has come up. And I think that's all valuable to bring into the next one.
You know, all these things that I think about that they should have in school that they don't, whether it's like financial literacy or understanding how to just be a regular human being, to even how you should approach dating. Because I think where we're at now, it's almost like it's evolved already, you know, that we can't even catch up to the teachings, because now dating online is huge. And I'm also like, I'm kind of open to it. I think I'm trying to be honest with myself, because I've never done it, but I'm trying to be honest with myself. Is it really me who's open to it? Or am I just, because I was... This is gonna sound bad. I'm like, I'm on a podcast where we talk about relationships, and I've been single for 3 years. Should I do it also for the plot? You know what I mean? Let me get myself some content. Yeah, I think it's half and half a little bit. You know, I truthfully do value the experience.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be fun even if it's bad.
Sure. And I think it's the openness, right? You know, sometimes things happen when you least expect it as well. And
also
so you might go into it thinking, you know, we'll just see what happens. Could be fun, maybe strange, maybe weird, but, you know, could connect with some people and see what happens. But you might kind of meet someone who actually really takes you by surprise. And
now I don't even know how to do it. I'm like, I wonder how this is going to be, because it would be my first time when I do it. I kind of do want to make it a point. And also just in general, I feel like it's weird, but it's just like how I was talking about like being extrovert and introvert. It requires practice. Yeah. You know, I've been out of the game, quote unquote, for so long. It's probably weird as hell for me. I can't even imagine. Like, so I have this thing that we've done a couple times on the podcast where I have an incredibly hard time complimenting women on their physical looks. Always been the case for a very, very long time, unless they're my significant other. So unless we have this rapport already, it's extremely difficult.
Okay.
So for me to go out and put myself out there and compliment women on their physical looks is almost impossible. Yeah.
What's the resistance or like the difficulty for you?
I think this part is something that we talked about a couple times too. When I was younger, when my mom would bring me around, a lot of adults would say, "Oh, he's such a cute kid," you know. And my mom would be like, "Oh, don't like think too much of it. Like they're adults. They're gonna say that because you're my son," you know. And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay." Like, so people just say things, which people do. A lot of adults do. You know, again, this goes back to how the kid understands it, right? To me, I took it to the extreme where it's like, okay, well, you know, they made me misunderstand. I don't want people to misunderstand me. And I think that continuing to where I am now, also where people don't want to mistake compliments as flirtation. that comes into something that I have to think about too, where it's like, oh, I just want to compliment this person because I want to compliment them, and I don't want them to take it the wrong way because of how I took it as a child. I took it to the very extreme to where I don't want to be misunderstood in that way, and by the extreme meaning that I can't even say it at all, right? Until I have that consent, almost, right? As with being in a relationship, it's like I almost get automatic consent to say, like, you look beautiful today. As a stranger, it might be unwarranted, which is what makes me fearful, because I mentioned, this is probably the first time I mentioned this, but in 2016, I think I was just hanging around with a lot of my friends that are girls, and they would mention how, like, some guys came off as creepy, coming off too strong, and that almost like validated my fear. And I was like, okay,
hold back.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I don't want to be like that. To where now I'm becoming more open-minded to it. It's like, okay, is there an approach? And also at the same time, like, how much, it goes back to what we're talking about, how much should I care about what a person thinks?
Sure. It's like, how do I find that balance where, obviously kind of being respectful in whatever situation, but also being authentic and feeling like I can express myself. And
because I feel like it does come down to intent, but you also can't expect, especially a stranger, to know your intent. Right? But you're fearful of coming off like a creep.
Sure. Yeah, but the fact that you're already thinking, like, I don't want to come off as a creep, I think that's an indication that it's likely that you won't come off as a creep.
You know what? I would like to think that, but I've had this experience that further validated how I felt.
Okay.
Was I remember I was out, and I'm not here to rag on someone at all, but I was out with a group of friends, and we got with another group of friends, and when I go out and drink, a lot of it is camaraderie to me. So I like to cheers and celebrate together. And there was this one girl in the group, and see, this is why I feel like I'm a dick, but like I had to add in, she was definitely not my type. And she was alone. No one cheers her. And I felt bad. So I was like, okay, cheers, just to kind of include you. And she was like, oh. And after she cheers me, she wiped off her bottle, and she was like, disgusting. And I was like, whoa, what the hell? Like, does she think that I'm like coming on to her? Like, why would she react in that way?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh crap. If she could take something as platonic as that and make it into some situation where I'm a creep, like, then anything could happen.
I mean, that's interesting to think about. And sometimes we might have like good intentions, but people can take it the wrong way. And sometimes it's kind of out of our control. And I mean, that's a very interesting response. Like, it sounds quite harmless in terms of cheers and including her. And
it's difficult. It's difficult.
I mean, that actually just makes me think of something that's been a really powerful realization, is that so often how people react or respond, how people react or behave is not a reflection of our worth. And maybe it's like a slight tangent, but it just made me think of this idea that, like, everyone has their own, it's not to say that we shouldn't, like, look at our role in stuff and reflect on kind of any, like, behaviors and so on. But so often, because everyone has their own stuff and triggers or, conditioning and fears and so on, like, how people respond in different situations or view certain situations isn't a reflection on us typically. And I don't know, I just started thinking about that when we're trying to understand, like, what was that kind of response, and it didn't sound like what you did seemed creepy or disrespectful, but I wonder what might have gone on in her experience. Maybe it's her stuff or how she viewed something from, like, maybe a past situation that brought up some feelings, and it ended up kind of being directed towards you.
And that's tough, especially the person was a stranger. You don't know what people have gone through and how they're gonna receive what you do. You know, and which is why I'm so conflicted when it comes to doing that, because I think the more I sit with myself, I believe I should not put as much weight into it as I did prior. You know, I should be conscious of it, of how people feel, and kind of read the room.
Sure.
Which I think is the reason why people call it too strong, is because they can't read the room. But also not to take like a reaction such as repulsion as like, okay, that's my fault. I'm a creep now.
Personal thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be just you. And it's weird. It's like a fine line though.
It is.
Like, how do you decide, am I being a creep, or, you know, is she just misreading what I'm doing?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess like you said, it's that awareness of, okay, I want to always read the room, and I don't want to be a creep, and you know, always want to come from a good place. But, you know, sometimes it's hard to know how people will react to different things. And sounds like as long as you know that your intentions were good and you didn't, intend to do anything strange.
I feel like you feel so conflicted. We're now talking about this.
It's so tricky, isn't it?
It's
hard to know.
I think it's maybe a cultural thing too. I feel like it's definitely more for people to come on strong. I think it's not as common in Asian culture. I feel like it's definitely more common in like a very Americanized culture, for one, just because the way people perceive things. So for instance, the reason why I talk about that is like in Europe, people will kiss each other on the cheek and it's like nothing. Right? You don't view it as something romantic or sexual.
Right.
They don't sexualize that. But over here, it's like, oh, what the hell does that mean? Like, you must be into me. So the way you receive it might be due to your culture.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually. Kind of culturally, like the different perceptions and like practices even.
Yeah, it's like when I grew up, I had a very hard time understanding why in Vietnamese culture it was so common to call you names that Americans would be offended by. You know, like, oh, hey, piggy, or say things very bluntly, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And over there, it's like sometimes it's just a pet name, or it just doesn't really mean anything, doesn't really hold weight. But over here, I remember being very upset because one of my uncles called my friend fat when we were like 7 years old. And I was like, why do you have to say that? You know, to which my friend felt the same way, you know, but culturally we were so different. And maybe he didn't know that that's what was happening.
Yeah.
To be culturally aware is like different too.
Like culturally aware and sensitive. Yeah, so true. I mean, I'm just thinking about some Asian cultures, a lot of Asian cultures, a lot of comments are based on appearance, like weight, even, you're thinner, you're fatter. But then it's confusing because if they're like, oh, you know, you've gained some weight, you're at a meal, and it's like, oh, eat more, you know, and then this is important, and that could be a love language. So the messages can be confusing, and even though they might mean well, it's hard to know how that affects people, and what people might be going through, and it's hard to hear.
I think getting to today's point of awareness is where it's going to finally transition. Because while that's happened to us, we have to kind of break that, right? Because the way we understand things now is, while we know that it's culturally different, like, it's not going to work for the future generations.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, it's time to move past this. Like, it actually does more harm than...
For sure.
I wouldn't even say good. I don't think it ever does good. It does neutral at best, right? Where people don't take it to heart, so there's like, whatever. So at best, it's neutral.
Brush it off
if
we can,
Exactly. But at worst, it's like negative.
Right. I mean, that could lead to, body image issues, eating disorder, all sorts of things.
I think it does lead to that. Like, most of the time, it does. And it's because a lot of times it's being said to children.
Right. It's like, what are these messages that I'm constantly hearing, and how do I control this situation, or what does that mean about myself or my worth or all of that? Yeah, but definitely important to have those conversations now, and like you said, being more aware of it for the future.
Do you think there is, because my personal opinion, I feel like with therapy and psychological things, it's starting to advance in like very different directions, whether it's talking about psychedelics or things like breath work or even extreme psychedelics like ayahuasca. Do you feel like there's a direction that's going to go to where there is a system in which people could partake to where they can normalize themselves before it becomes problematic? Because I feel like a lot of these times people look for these solutions when it's already a problem.
Yes. I mean, I think it starts with education and education from a young age. And, again, also with parents as well, just so that they can, parents can be more mindful in terms of what messages are being shared.
Imagine if parents had to take a test to be parents. Like you had to pass the bare basics of psychology before you become a parent.
That could be interesting. Yeah. Or therapy for parents, counseling, or just to have some guidance or kind of more education there. I think that would be really valuable because it's a lot of responsibility. And, everyone's human and no one's perfect, but I think it's that awareness, but also if there is anything that we end up doing, it's the repair that I think is so important, right? It's like, of course, like maybe I raise my voice and that happened. I'm human. I had a stressful day, but then one can kind of go to their child and say, I'm sorry that I did that, and I had a stressful day and blah, blah, blah. So that at least there's this understanding of, it's not that there's something wrong with, like the child doesn't think there's something wrong with me, but I understand kind of where that came from. But yeah, that test is an interesting idea. Because I think, I would certainly say the education is key to clear up any like misconceptions or lack of understanding around like mental health struggles and seeking help, so that people know how to identify certain symptoms or issues when they come up and not feel like they have to wait till it's like crisis time before seeking help.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I don't know how it'll ever be enforced, but I think that's great because I think another, and this is just me, just showered thoughts, right? I think the reason why it's good to have early on too is so that those problems don't persist. Because the thing about those problems is that you kind of pass them on.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like nipping them at the butt. Versus allowing them to spread. A lot of the things that I deal with now are due to my family, just like how you're talking about how people tend to date people like their parents. And then that they have kids and then the same
like
thing.
The cycle continues.
Cycle continues, right? Or, I saw this on like this psychologist's YouTube channel. She was talking about like habits of or characteristics of cheaters, and people who have been cheated on are more likely to cheat than people who haven't been cheated on.
Interesting.
And it's like an eye for an eye type of thing. So if we could cut the hurt early on, then it doesn't need to spread almost.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting point. Like identifying the hurt. Because with cheating, there's so much there too, and what brings someone to do that, and what's going on with someone internally that either they're not able to express or not able to understand, or that's a whole there's so much there. But understanding that, I suppose, and dealing with it can certainly help with preventing more. Yeah,
it's crazy. Well, that's like a whole nother episode on it. For sure. I feel like I have so much to say about that. And it's kind of scary now. It's one of those things also, it's like the glass shattering moment where, I still hold my ethics very high up there when it comes to something like that, infidelity. But my ethics as far as like the people that I surround myself by, that has been so conflicting. And I'm gonna be completely 100% honest about that. Where when I was younger, I used to virtue signal, like, fuck cheaters, like, that, you're a shit human being, you know, just like, just exile these people, right? And then now I'm like, oh crap. Like, I know some cheaters, you know, and they're good people outside of this. And it's almost like, I'm so conflicted. I don't know what to do about this.
Torn there, kind of morally, and it's a struggle because it's a sense of, how do I not condone this behavior, like the act of cheating? But if it's a friend too, how do I kind of try to understand or support or try to help them kind of understand why that happened or what they're going through, and to kind of work through that and gain clarity for themselves, hopefully. But it is, I can see the conflict there.
It's so hard. And with that, you know, another glass shattering moment to me was that being a good person at one thing doesn't necessarily make you a good person at another thing. That might seem like they coincide with each other. So, you know, being a good husband doesn't mean you're a good father, right? And vice versa. Or, you know, being a good son doesn't mean you're a good brother. You know, I've come to realize that people all have their faults and flaws, like one way or another. And I think to condone something or to condemn something is sometimes more difficult than it seems, as people are multifaceted, right?
100%. Yeah. People are
complex,
fascinating, certainly complex.
I'm sure you know this.
I mean, there's always more to discover, and I guess that's the thing about being in the field. Like, I'll never kind of see everything or know everything, which makes it kind of fascinating, I suppose. And I'm always learning so much about people and about myself.
So I have a question for you, and this is my final question.
Okay.
But on your own, what is a theory that you've come to conclude in psychology or in therapy? Something that's not driven by academia. This is something purely you observed.
I think a powerful one, and this isn't sort of my own theory, but something that I do observe, and, you know, is that often when we, you know, avoid something or resist something out of fear, like, we really do strengthen the feelings that we are trying to avoid. And you know, when we're trying to avoid relationships because of fear of vulnerability or getting hurt, and so often we end up strengthening the feelings that we're trying to protect ourselves against. So like feelings of isolation or feeling unloved and so on. And, you know, similar with like anxiety, for example, where, you know, the more we avoid something, the more we get frustrated with the self, or there's even more anxiety about the thing that scares us. And so, yeah, I guess it's sort of challenging the self to put ourselves out there, do things that are challenging and difficult and scary, but that I guess ultimately will lead to more growth and healing or positive changes.
I totally see that all the time. It feels counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Like, because our initial instincts is you want to avoid it because it's uncomfortable, or like your survival instincts, like danger.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times it's great to kind of look into that and see if it's going to do something for you. And this is cliche as hell, but they always say like growth is outside of the comfort zone, right? So
100% cliche, but definitely true. And yeah, I guess that's what I've been definitely trying to do, taking those healthy risks and pushing the self, even though it's scary, but definitely want to have as few regrets as possible.
Yeah. What would you say is the biggest one that you're kind of tackling?
I think it's still related to vulnerability, I will say.
Wow.
But also in terms of putting myself out there, in terms of feeling seen by more people. There's this idea of, you know, I think for quite some time it felt like I I had a lot of things that I wanted to do, put out there, but there's this sense of hiding in different ways for fear of whether it's judgment or humiliation or all of that, maybe kind of more shame based. So though it's definitely been a lot kind of more, definitely taken strides in that direction and feel much better in that sense, that's still kind of a work in progress, I would say. But I'm trying to set intentions of, okay, act from courage rather than comfort, and kind of reminding myself that often the biggest regrets are the chances that we don't take, and rather than the ones that we do, regardless of the outcomes.
I just want to say thank you to Trina for sharing and giving me insight on her expertise. That was fun, to say the least. Can you let the audience know where they can find you?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. Would love to connect with people through social media, on Talk to Trina. That's also my website, so it's www.talktotrina.com. Yeah.
And I want to say thank you to our audience for watching all the way through. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment below what you guys want us to talk about next time. And remember, live fast, eat ass.